Welcome to Season 2 of the Erotic Realm podcast, where we explore the world of eroticism, one erotic realm at a time. I'm Em, a sexologist and kinkster. The mission of the Erotic Realm is to humanize desire in all of its forms, including darker desires. Each episode, we dive deep into the psychology of desire with a sexpert, everyday kinkster, or a kink expert. This is an independent podcast. To support it, please consider becoming a paid subscriber at psychologyofdesire.com, where you'll also find deep dives into desire and surveys that you can participate in. You can also sign up there to get the podcast delivered directly to your inbox when it's released. And now for today's episode. The following conversation explores neurodivergence, power, and what happens when difference becomes a form of erotic intelligence. I'm joined by Kritikl, a neurodivergent dominant, sadist, rigger, and curator of safe spaces who lives kink as a 24/7 embodied practice. You may actually recognize his voice from one of the Kink Intentions episode earlier this year, where he shared his intentions for growth. And in this conversation, we go much deeper into the psychology behind them. We explore how neurodivergence shapes his desire, how pattern recognition becomes part of erotic connection, and why kink can feel like one of the first places where difference is not just accepted, but valued. This is a conversation about belonging, integration, and the possibility that what makes us different may also be what makes us most alive. Enjoy. Welcome to the Erotic Realm podcast. Today we are exploring the erotic realm of Daniel. Welcome, Daniel.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Happy to have you here. So first of all, we just want to hear a bit about your day-to-day life outside of kink. What are you into at the moment in terms of your hobbies and when you're not being kinky?
At the moment, a lot of what I'm doing is trying to get myself back into writing music, honestly. I was really big on local bands in the Melbourne scene 15, 20 years ago. And then I dropped out of that for quite a long time, and I'm just sort of starting to get my legs back into it again, really starting to find my groove. It's been a long time since I've written anything. And outside of that, I'm enjoying my more artsy sides, trying to incorporate some more creativity into my life, getting an interest in poetry over anything, which is kind of stems from my lyric writing from years past.
Beautiful. And what about your eroticism? How are you currently identifying in terms of your sexuality and your kink identity?
My sexuality is jumping around a lot. At the moment, I'm definitely straight. Heteroflexible is on my bet profile. But I think I'm still trying to discover that. I've been through the whole gamut of, I felt like I may be interested in, a diverse range of genders, and then have transitioned back into more AFAB style. So I'm not sure if it's a fluctuation or where it is, but I'm still trying to discover that for myself and see where I'm going. Like I'm not 100% sure on that. It's a work in progress.
Mm-hmm. Oh. And what about your kink identity?
That's also been fluctuating a lot. With myself, and having been single for a better part of 6 months at the moment, and leaving a dynamic previous to that, I'm more identifying with a simple top kinkster side of things, as opposed to anything from a dom perspective. Like, I still have that interest in DS relationships and sort of escalating into those areas, but I've stepped back a little bit from that, and I'm leaning into more of the general topping, enjoying my time with people and understanding my connections in that space.
Beautiful. And what would you say your top 3 kinks are currently? You're in this explorative space. What are you exploring?
Rope, wax, and impact are definitely my big ones.
Mm-hmm. And are you normally the top for these, or are these things that you switch with?
I'm normally the top. I don't have a lot of interest in bottoming for most kink side of things. I do a little bit of bottoming for rope just from a learning perspective so that I can get a better understanding of what is happening to the people that I'm also tying and give me a better appreciation for what is actually happening with them on a body perspective. But I don't get that subspace feel out of it. So it's a very different experience for me.
Mm-hmm. And you describe yourself as someone who lives kink 24/7. What does this mean for you?
It's more of a mindset side of things. It's something that I'm thinking about quite a lot. It is something that I like to engage in with people just in general, but it's not just the overarching what outsiders would consider kink. It's very much I'm trying to focus in on a values aligned system that is present in both my actual, I guess, my vanilla facing life and my kink life. I'm becoming more open with my kink side of things with more people and slowly becoming I'm already face out, but becoming actually face out with people that I know who aren't part of the scene and allowing that to be something that I have no shame around. It's the same with my new leanings towards polyamory and sort of slowly moving into this point of, okay, look, this is who I am and this is how I'm accepting it and trying to pull that into an identity that is just me all the time. And I've spent most of my life masking and trying to be something that I'm not, and I'm kind of sick of it. So I think this is an extension of myself and who I am, and it has always been there. And it's just been something that I've kind of buried quite deep down. So I'm trying to bring that to the surface more and just allow that to run free.
Yes, we love freedom. So you mentioned about masking and you're very open about being neurodivergent. When did you first realize that your brain worked differently?
When I first realized was very, very young. I don't have a great memory of my childhood. I have a lot of gaps in there and a lot of things that I just don't remember. I have very little understanding around, but I've always had that feeling of being an alien was the way that I described it. I was a big sci-fi nerd as a kid. I mean, I still am, but it was definitely one of the big things. I was very much into the whole sci-fi side of things, and I always just felt like I wasn't part of the planet and I had been dropped here from somewhere else and just couldn't understand or grasp so much of what seemed to come naturally to other people.
Mm-hmm. So there's someone that would understand your perspective that I'd like to bring into this conversation for a moment. I don't know if you've heard of her, Temple Grandin.
I have not.
She's an autistic scientist, professor of animal science, and one of the most well-known advocates for reframing autism, not as a deficit, but as a different way of processing the world. And what I really like about her way of approaching this is she doesn't romanticize her neurodivergence. She talks really honestly about the struggles that she's had, but she also insists that this difference can be a form of intelligence. And one of her most widely cited lines is simply, different, not less. And I think this is a really powerful bridge into this conversation about neurodivergence and kink, because both of these can exist in a world that misunderstands them, pathologizes them, or tries to shrink them. So I'm curious how that lands for you and your experience of your autism. When you hear different, not less, does that resonate with you? And has kink been one of the first places where your difference felt like strength?
It definitely resonates with me. It's I guess the idea of being less has always come from the neurotypical side of things and the way that I've been perceived to approach solutions or to approach interactions with people, or the way that I come to discussions and arguments with other people. And I think moving into more of a world where people are realizing that it's a difference and it's not a less than thing, it is just a quite literally a divergence from a general practice, that I've been able to feel happy within myself to just express and be who I am, which has kind of come full circle into leading into being a more open side of myself and reduce my masking. Not to say that I'm trying to be one of the people who uses that as a crutch. I'm still trying to learn and trying to establish ways that I can work within the world that I'm in, but doing it in a way that is more comfortable for myself and does actually speak to the realm of who I am in my inner world. So there's not this massive disconnect between my inner world and my outer world in the way that I'm presenting versus the way that I want to present.
Mm-hmm. So how did you discover the kink world?
That was... I've kind of known it's always existed, but I always had the stereotypical view of it. I knew what it was from the baselines of media, and I kind of went, oh, this seems really weird and intimidating and scary and all of these other things that I had no idea about. So I've known about that for many, many years. And it was something that I kind of touched on a little bit, both in some of the pornography that I watched, in some of the media that I watched, and some of the books that I read. But it was never something that I actually went out of my way to try and explore. There was kind of this blocker there. But I guess my true introduction to the scene as we know it now and where I'm at happened about almost 2 years ago. With my ex-partner. We both sort of dove into the world and started to explore it together and ended up where we are now.
Amazing. One of the concepts that you mentioned before the podcast was that you feel that your brain itself has been fetishized at times, especially your pattern recognition. And this was a concept that I haven't thought about before, that you can fetishize neurodivergence. Can you share more about that and what this means for you?
I think the big thing comes from being I hate to use like this stereotypical term, but trying to build away from the whole patriarchy side of things and having the emotions and the feelings and everything that we're told that we need to squash down, opening up and becoming more emotionally connected with myself and other people, as well as providing a bit of logical analysis and intelligence to that side of it, has shown me how big of a difference there is between the quintessential female versus male, standard female versus male programming in the way that we actually find attraction with each other, where men are very visual, very just looking at the things and really don't go too much further into it than where they're at. But having more of an interest in, or women having more of an interest in men who have depth, who have this understanding and knowledge, even though we're told that it's kind of not that way. We're tried to be programmed into that sense that is not actually how it is.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's it's a really interesting way, or it's a really interesting thing that has become aligned within me, and noticing that, but also noticing that I also have that big interest in intelligence with people. And I've said this to a whole bunch of the people that I am currently friends with and I interact with or play with. I'm probably the dumbest and least educated smart person out of the entire group of people that I know. Oh. Like I'm not, I'm definitely the little fish in a big pond kind of thing when it comes to that. I'm nothing in that regard special from that side of it. And I find myself gravitating towards the other side of the IQ bell curve.
Right. And what about in terms of what you crave with intimate connection? Because you said that you crave deep, intimate connection, but not always sexual connection. Was that something that you had to learn to disentangle from each other?
It was not. I think in the sense of inside myself, I kind of knew that it was a thing where I could have a deep, intimate connection with anybody without having it to be sexualized or having it to turn into something that is more than just this wonderful world of platonic love.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always been told by other people, and it's kind of been modeled and mirrored to me, like I think it has for everybody, that you have your levels of intimacy that you have with certain types of partners. So you have your acquaintances, your friends, your best friends, and your partner. And each of those have a very strict boundary in place that, while is very strict, is also very, very fluid and doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense when we start looking at it from any perspective other than really typical rom-com media side of things. And it becomes really, really hard to actually justify and bring in. But that has been something that I haven't had to deconstruct too much from my inner world, but it's definitely been something that I've had to reinforce in my outer world and really be able to just express that with no shame and no guilt, and feel okay in the way that I'm approaching different people of different friendship levels, but understanding that there's the intimacy there doesn't necessarily need to lead into a sexual relationship, and a sexual relationship doesn't need to lead into a heavily emotionally intimate relationship. They're all strands of relationships that are completely separate from each other, but build out a contained relationship with a single person.
Beautifully put. Let's talk about your kinky side a little bit more. As a dominant and sadist, what does power mean to you when it's working well?
Power, I feel, has a negative connotation. It's power. Power to me, in the way that it is presented, comes from this idea of having more than and having unjustified control over something. That's in my brain anyway. I prefer to think of that the dominance and the sadism as forms of general leadership, which are more of a guidance-based practice for me. I spent 12 years in the technical field, in professional technical side of things, doing software engineering, and a lot of that has been in leadership roles where I've worked with other engineers and other people to help guide them through their own journeys in a professional sense. And that's something that I've taken away into my personal life, where I love being there to help people find what they're after and curate things for them and work with them to dig a little bit deeper inside themselves, find what it is that they're after, but not necessarily control what they're looking for or how they're looking for it.
So you've taken the professional leadership into your role as a dominant.
Yes. Yeah. And that's just from a natural perspective of wanting to look out for people that I care for as well. It's not necessarily from it's not ego based, and it's not something that I think about. It is more something that just happens. I've been told that I have a nurturing disposition towards a lot of people, and it's kind of naturally there. It's not something that I have to actively engage with. It just happens when I have any form of care or level of interest in a person. I'm going to naturally want to help them as much as I can without trying to burn myself out.
And let's talk about rope more. What is it about rope that you enjoy, and what drew you to being a rigger?
So what drew me to being a rigger was actually just enjoying bedroom bondage at the start and trying to use it to attach somebody to the bedhead. I honestly didn't think that I would ever be the type of person to get into the actual art form of shibari. I didn't think that I would have the patience or the technical interest in it, or even, I guess, the dexterity within myself to be able to perform some of the things that people do in shibari. But I've learned that the I want to get up and fly side of shibari is such a minimal piece of that entire process. And while I love my suspensions, and I am still new and still learning about these suspensions and how to do them safely and correctly, and trying to take my time to not push past my own level of skill, I found that my interest has slowly drawn, and I've realized that there's so much involved in floor play. There's so much involved in partials. There's so much nuance in there that I have an infinite amount of ways to interact with a single person at any point in time, using rope as a tool to provide that connection with them. So that's kind of where it's really pushed me into or that's sort of been where my focus has been, and the thing that I've loved most about it, and being drawn into it. But yeah, I never thought I'd be into it. I never thought I would be able to do it to the level that I am. I thought it would always be the dirty bedroom bondage, and that would sort of be it. But you know, one foot in front of the other, and eventually you find yourself in a completely different state.
So was there a particular moment when you were like, I'm all in, or was it a gradual process?
I think the moment that I realized I was all in was when I went to my first shibari performance, not long after I joined one of the schools in Melbourne and was starting to learn as a beginner there. I was there for about a month or two, I believe, and then I went to an actual performance in front of a bunch of people, and something clicked in my head, and I went, I want to do that. I want to be able to do that. And I've always been very big on performance and being in front of people. The idea has always been aligned with me, hence the music side of things. I did, again, drop it for a good decade and a half, where I haven't actually followed that creative path and kind of stifled that a little bit. But I'm finding that the thing that is ignited that the most has been seeing shibari performances and also doing performances myself, and realizing how much I love being up on stage, curating this experience with another person, but also with a crowd, and providing something of artistic quality, I hope artistic quality anyway, to this group of people.
What does it feel like to be in the process of a shibari performance?
Honestly, it feels like any other scene. I definitely have a lot more nerves going into a performance than I do just a regular scene at any event that I would go to. But I think as soon as I get up on the stage, as soon as I pull the person that I'm with into me, everything becomes extremely comfortable. Everything becomes very, very simple. And the crowd almost melts away. It's just, it is literally just another scene with somebody that I want to connect with and I want to enjoy and I want to feel great with. And there's a whole lot of blurred faces and blurred room around me. So it is an invigorating experience to get to the end of it, though, and look out and reestablish a connection with the crowd in a more, I guess, in an actual way, and actually noticing who's looking and how intimately and intently they are looking at myself and the model on stage, and being able to bring everybody into that, and then have everybody excited for the performance to have been finished and to have seen that entire experience and to experience that with us.
And how do you feel after finishing the scene? And the performance? Do you feel like a top high, a dom high, or is it more relaxing, excitement? What are you feeling in your body?
Most of the time, it's quite calm, actually. A lot of my high comes from the anticipation beforehand, and it's almost like I get to this peak of anxiousness and eagerness to do something, and then throughout the performance I'm draining that. So when I get to the end, I'm feeling almost calm and euphoric about this idea of having been seen. And I guess you could call it a top space, but it's very different to ending a scene with a partner at an event where the process wasn't to necessarily be seen, but we have just been perceived, as opposed to, hey, you are going to be perceived and you're expected to be perceived. It's definitely this. It almost makes me feel small in the best way possible. It kind of reaffirms the dust, the sand on the beach metaphor of life, and we are just one piece in a infinitesimally bigger piece of world that is then a small piece inside of itself.
It sounds like a really connecting experience then.
It's definitely grounding for me. It's really good to be able to feel that at the end of doing something that also has such a huge creative outlet for me. So it's very nice. And it has been very connective with people who I have actually done the performances with afterwards. There's very much like I already have a connection with a lot of the people that I'm going to do a performance with. I don't generally try and go out and be like, hey, I've never met you before, let's do a performance. So it's definitely a bit of a different experience, because now I have somebody else who I can share that unique point with, and they can also feel what it is that I feel doing that.
And performing in this way with someone, I'm curious to know, is it sometimes more intimate than sex? Or is it a different type of intimacy?
I don't want to say it's a different type of intimacy for sure, because I mean, look, there's always levels of intimacy in both sides of it. Sex doesn't have to be intimate, but neither does rope.
Right.
And it very much depends on the vibe of the day, the flow of what is actually happening. With the performance side of things, there's definitely going to be not necessarily fabricated intimacy, but I guess going to turn up the idea of intimacy prior to getting into into the performance, or at least I do, so that there is going to probably be more of a baseline of intimacy, even if the vibe wasn't completely there, as more of a bit of a showmanship side of things. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds great. I would love to get more into that myself. It sounds like a really fun experience. Now, one of the traditions on the podcast is exploring a research article. And today's article is titled Autism, Sexuality and BDSM. So what I love about this paper is that it moves away from the deficit-based models and instead asks a different question. Not what if BDSM is a symptom, but rather an accommodation. So the author Pliskin argues that BDSM communities may feel especially aligned for autistic people because of three things. One, the emphasis on explicit communication. Two, the structure of negotiated roles and rules. And three, the way sensory intensity can be consciously curated rather than chaotic. So when you look at your own kink, especially as a rigger and sadist, do you experience elements of play as sensory organization rather than chaos?
Not particularly.
Okay.
While I'm clinically diagnosed with autism, I am also very ADHD presenting and have
so you like the chaos.
Yes. And it's funny that you bring this up, because I have had this conversation with a good 15 or 20 friends within the scene about,
okay.
It's a constant talking point for us, where we're noticing how many people are neurodivergent presenting. I'm not going to speak for people and say that they're definitely neurodivergent, but the presentation is overwhelmingly there when you consider the general population versus the BDSM population, at least within the scene that I'm part of.
Yeah.
It's wild how noticeable it is, and it's always led to this point of we feel, and yes, obviously very anecdotal, but we feel that it's very much BDSM practice is an offshoot of neurodivergence, simply because who's going to take the time to sit there and think about the ways that we can make sex and intimacy more connective for people who struggle to connect with themselves and each other, and who need a place to have such explicit discussions and consent around every single thing, from the smallest of touches to the largest of practices that we're going to attempt, and some of the most dangerous things that we could probably think of within a as safe environment as possible. It feels almost clinical, to the point of it's extremely attractive. And I can't imagine that somebody who genuinely identifies with neurotypical tendencies and pseudo-social discussions is going to be able to understand why it is doing what we do. And that's taking away the entire side of the sadism and masochism side of things, where we're sensory seeking potentially, or we're trying to use it as a way to ground ourselves in our body, or all of these other things that also come up that can theoretically be traced back to neurodivergence and a misunderstanding of the world around us. So trying to contain and understand everything as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. So does kink feel safer for you because the rules are named out loud, that there is this container?
It does. It very much does. I'm always one who's worried about stepping on people's toes and moving past a boundary. I have been my entire life. It's one of those things where I would constantly miss social cues, and still do to a heavy extent, where I need explicit information. Otherwise, I'm going to ask more questions, and I'm going to continually ask more questions until I get enough information to be able to do one thing that I need to do, and people find that annoying. So having this space where I can feel comfortable just talking to somebody and being like, okay, so are you happy with me touching your right index finger at the very tip, but not maybe at the knuckle? Like, I haven't had that discussion with somebody, but the potential to have that discussion with somebody has been the thing that has kind of drawn me into this entire world and how I approach that. But then has also eked out into the point of, well, I don't care if people outside of this don't understand why I'm having these kinds of discussions. If I'm going to interact with anybody, I want to have that level of clarity with them. So if they want it, they will listen to it and we'll work it out. If they don't, then they're not the person for me to interact with, and I just need to find somebody else, as opposed to trying to fit their mold and pushing myself into that spot.
Mm-hmm. And do you experience your love for rope dominance or creating these safe spaces for people as kind of a special interest?
I do a little bit. I think I try to stay away from the concept of special interest, because I've identified with having a lot of different things that I have quite a big interest in, but a lot of them have also been fairly surface level, and I've never gone to the levels of rabbit hole deep dive on a particular thing that's completely mundane and indifferent to 99% of the population. So I try not to co-opt that, because I definitely haven't gotten to that level where I can like spout off every single little thing about, about a particular band or a particular genre of music or a particular system that's out there, or the different types of fungi that are there. And like, I've had conversations about all of these with people that have a million times more knowledge in these areas than I do. And while I've had interest in each of them, I've never gone to that level, which is an interesting one for me to having realized that. I've always wanted to, but I always I think the ADHD drive for new and shiny has really put a hindrance on that. And sorry.
No, that's okay. All right. I wanted to ask you, if BDSM didn't exist, do you think you would have struggled more to understand yourself? Has it given you an understanding of yourself that you haven't found elsewhere?
Oh, it really has. It really has. I think it's not necessarily understanding myself, but more of accepting myself. I always wondered why, I was really drawn to violent sports. So I play field hockey. I've done training in multiple martial arts styles and have done cage fighting. All of those things were things that like I genuinely enjoyed and had fun with, but I never enjoyed hurting people. And the dichotomy of, hey, I really like getting into a ring and fighting with somebody, but I also don't like hurting people outside of that, has always been something that I could never quite pair together on how I approach that. But since getting into the BDSM side of things, for instance, and realizing that the big difference between those two things is right in the middle, there is this massive consent piece where somebody says, I am willing to either accept the pain or I really want the pain, as opposed to I don't want it and that's not something I want, and now I'm just getting hit with it because of something that's happening outside of that world, has kind of given me that way to box that together and go, okay, I understand exactly why. I have an enjoyment for this. It's something that fuels me and is an enjoyment piece there, but it's only when there is this explicit piece of consent that's connected to it. Like, I don't want to go randomly hurting people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have that understanding before getting into kink. I just kind of knew it. It was just kind of there as a values piece to me, and I didn't understand why or how it worked. And so I was very shameful of the consensual side of things, rather than just being like, oh, I do the fight training because I enjoy the practice behind it and learning and trying to do self-defense. Like, no, I enjoyed actually getting in and like having that physicality as well.
Mm-hmm. And was that a realization that you had at your first kink event, perhaps, when you saw people exploring that physicality in a consent-based way?
No, actually, that was something that I started to piece together after I had my diagnosis for autism, which I got when I was 32, I believe, so about 4 years ago. So it wasn't a long time ago. Like, I haven't had this. I've had this like profound amount of work that I've done inside myself from a brain perspective in understanding the whole neurodivergence, and it hasn't been a super long time for me. But once I understood the neurodivergent side of things and I started being more happy with expressing myself, one of the things that I gravitated towards was a lot of smart writing. Like, I was reading a lot of books that involved some form of BDSM, some form of kink, some sort of non-vanilla sexual activities, and realizing just how many of those I liked. And then sort of from there, slowly diving into this idea of like, okay, why do I feel bad about this? Why do I feel that this is a shameful thing? And then piecing everything together. The BDSM world has definitely solidified some of the more extreme parts of it, like CNC and the sadism side. But I was starting to move towards that just from understanding myself a little better and understanding that my brain was a little bit different and that I am not alone in having these thoughts and feelings and these weird guilt and shame around it as well.
So it sounds like you read a lot of books during that time. Do you have a particular book that you would recommend to someone who's just starting to explore this world?
I do, actually. Although, actually, look, okay, I don't want to speak for everybody because that's, it's such a wide subject. But the book that I really enjoyed was Give Me More. It was a really simple, like, felt kind of like a vanilla person writing about kink and sex clubs who had kind of never been to one, but like that was the understanding and part of my understanding of the world before I actually went to one. And I can see quite the huge differences between them. But the way that everything was handled and the way that everything was discussed in it was really beautiful. And that was kind of my first foray into hearing about shibari as well. So the idea is that there's a husband and wife who open up a kink and BDSM dungeon, or they're trying to, and they're trying to go to other cities to get information from people on what they need to do and trying to get educators and performers there for their opening. But then they've got a third person who's kind of been their third wheel for a very long time, and they've been in a non-discussed closed polycule triangle essentially, and they're slowly working that out and becoming part of themselves. And that gave me a lot of information around where I stand from sexual experience side of things, where I stand from intimacy, some of the shame and guilt that I've found when I've noticed that, I can have these intimate feelings with multiple people. But then also realizing that, hey, there are people out there who are going to enjoy that, who want that, and who care. But that was a big one for me, like being able to read that. A lot of the other ones that I read were a bit more dark romancy side of things, which very dubious, and I wouldn't suggest a lot of people if you want to try and get it from like a really specific how do the kink world side of things works. That was more of a dive into some psychological stuff that probably not good.
Okay. Well, it just shows how important books are, though, right? The fact that you were able to process and see yourself so much in that one book, they're just so powerful. Why it's so important to write down these experiences and share with other people like we're doing now so they can see themselves in it and learn and grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of those things that has always, that I've always struggled with, is processing things within myself. I have to be an external processor. I need to verbalize with people. Otherwise, I ruminate and create scenarios, and I am not able to actually work out what it is that I need or want.
Right.
I need to be able to verbalize it with people, or I need to write it down. I need to have it externalized. And having alternative media that has given me a safe space to understand and hear about some of these concepts that I've had in my mind and I thought were just me and were like meant to be shameful and weird and all of these other negative connotations. But then seeing that, oh, somebody has actually written about this, there's more than me that feels this way, has given me a chance to really reflect on who I am in myself.
Yep, love that. Speaking of reflecting, I'd love to hear from you now about a peak erotic experience that you've had, a time that really stays in your memory. What comes to mind?
My current play partner that I do quite a bit of rope with, actually our first ever tie together is always, will always stand out to me. And it's one that I've written about on FET. It's one that I kind of bring back to the almost the mecca of why I do kink and why I have fallen in love with it so much and why I try and bring it into a lot of aspects of my life. And that was just this almost harmonious experience where I'm not a spiritual person. I've never really been great with the whole spiritual side of things, but rope has given me this spiritual area and this understanding of human connected energy that I've never understood and was kind of a bit on the fence about for a very long time. But the tie that I will always remember is this single tie where this is the first time that I've ever tied with this person. I'd known them for a few months beforehand, and we'd been talking quite a lot. And we're like, hey, look, we're at a rope jam together. Let's do a tie. See how we go. And it was a really simple floor tie. It was nothing special, but from the second that we went into the scene until the second we finished the aftercare of the scene, it was just like I knew this person back to front, side to side, upside down, inside out. There was not a point throughout the scene where I went, this feels weird, this feels awkward, or I don't know how they're feeling and I don't know what they want or what they're expecting from me. It all just flowed so naturally that it was almost effortless. And that, I think that will always stick with me in that sense, because it's incredible how easy I've been able to find it to connect with people inside rope. And that was sort of my first real experience of having a new play partner and being able to feel this almost otherworldly experience where there was nothing there and I knew everything about this person in 1/10 of a second of starting that scene.
Wow. That sounds amazing. And what about the future? What's something that you're looking forward to experiencing, or a tie that you want to do, or a kink you want to explore in the future?
At the moment, I'm really interested in doing a lot more wax play. A lot of my general life issues have been that I am way too fast and way too not in the moment. I do everything or try and do as much as I can in as little time as possible to be as efficient as possible. And I took that into rope when I started as well, where I was just trying to get the rope on as quickly as I could and not taking a breath to get into the steps. That's kind of grounded me a little bit, and I've learned to slow down a lot and enjoy each of the moments as the moment that they are and not go for the expectation of what's happening at the end. But what I'm really interested in experiencing now is the wax side of things, because I've done a little bit of wax play with some people and I love the sensualness and the intimacy behind it. When there's, regardless of if there's rope involved or there's anything else, I find that puts me into this space of real care, real softness, real slowness that I really like, but I haven't worked out quite how to move that into other practices all of the time. Like, I have to be quite intentional with it in most areas, but when it comes to wax, it's very, very, very easy for me to just be like, okay, this is a really sensual experience. This is what I want I want to curate a sensual experience for the person who I'm playing with.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to think about it. I don't have to do anything like that. It is just what it is. And I want to explore that more. I want to explore my slowness and my softness and how it can relate to other people, but also how I can bring that out into my general life, but also some of my other kinks as well, and really broaden that horizon of I'm not just doing kink for kink's sake, and actually having each time I go into a scene, I can help curate a bit more of a vibe and work with somebody to provide something of an experience that is more than just what you would regularly get if you were just throwing things at each other.
That sounds like you have a lot to look forward to. And I love what you said about how rope has given you the ability to connect more to the moment. It's almost like it's taught you to meditate in a way.
It has. And funnily, like, I've tried to meditate many, many times in my life, and it's not a thing that I could do. It wasn't a thing that I could muster it within myself. Whether we look at that as a lack of dedication to being able to do it, I don't know, but it has never been something that I've been able to do. But the idea of rope and getting a handle on the basics and then moving into more of a based idea and understanding that, hey, I can kind of just sit here in a space with somebody and have a connected energy has helped me realize that I can do that in other spaces, because rope isn't the thing that's doing it. It is me doing it. But rope has just been the tool that has kind of opened up that world for me.
I love that. So if there's someone listening who is neurodivergent and they're standing at the edge of kink spaces, they're unsure if they'll belong, what would you want them to know?
You absolutely belong. 100%. There is no doubt in my mind that you won't step into a munch, you won't step into an event, and you won't find 99% of the people in there are going to relate to you in some way. They're going to have similar experiences to you within the world, and on more than a surface level too. Like, they're going to have things that they think about in the exact same way that you do. You'll find somebody who does that. There's no doubt in my mind. You'll find people who you can walk up to them and see one implement it and ask about it, and they'll have like almost a thesis on that item and be able to tell you everything about how it was made, who made it, where it came from, the materials in it, what they feel about it, why they use it, almost to that point of a special interest again, and showing that you can be interested in anything and info dump about whatever it is that you want here, and you'll be safe. And people not only want to hear what you have to say, but also want to tell you all the cool things and like bring you into this world. Nobody wants to keep you out of it. Everybody wants to bring you in.
Yep, very well said, and I completely agree. You're more than welcome in kink spaces. And finally, if you had to describe your erotic self right now in one word, what would that word be and why?
Intentional. And the reason for that is a lot of what I've done in life has been more of necessity. It has been things that I haven't thought too much about and I've dove into to do them. And I'm finding that as I move through life more and more, and I find who I am as a person, I'm realizing how disconnected I am from my inner world and my values and morals within there, and what my external world was holding for me and what I was doing with it. So I'm trying to be as intentional as possible with everything that I do to move towards a point that I am the best version of myself within my own mind, and I'm the best person for me.
So much growth there. Beautiful. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for this conversation and for sharing so openly about your erotic realm and your neurodivergence. It's been a pleasure exploring the erotic realm with you.
Thank you very much for having me. I've really loved talking about it.
Well, thank you again. I'm Em, and this has been the Erotic Realm podcast. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Erotic Realm podcast. This is an independent podcast. If you want to see more episodes made, you can support it at psychologyofdesire.com by becoming a paid subscriber and entering the realm with many other supporters. The mission of the Erotic Realm is to humanize kink and desire in all of its forms. And we can't do that without you. Until the next time, stay perverted.